Hi there, I'm Mark Householder, President of Athletes in Action, and you are listening to the podcast, Who Are You?
Welcome to the Who Are You podcast, a project that explores how to understand and live out your life's purpose. In this limited series, we'll interview people whose unique experiences and insights will increase your self-awareness and help you live a more meaningful life. Each episode will address one of the following themes: how to figure out what you want, what to do when you figure it out, how to deal with setbacks along the way, how to excel and accelerate your career path, and what to do when you've made it. Today's guest is Mark Householder. Mark will help us get clarity around what to do when you've made it. He may disagree with that, but we think he's made it in his career. As the president of a large nonprofit, Mark spends a lot of time evaluating and developing talent because he cares about people and the long-term health and stability of his organization. If you want actionable, thoughtful tips from a seasoned executive on how to share your knowledge and wisdom with others, then this podcast will help you greatly. During the times I've spoken with Mark, I've always felt a little smarter and extremely grateful that he would spend any amount of time with me. The way I would describe Mark every time I talk to him is that he is life-giving. Does that make sense, Cecily? Yeah.
I thought you were going to ask me if I agreed, and I was like, I just met him.
Am I life-giving?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Okay, good.
Zero hesitation.
Very good answer. Thank you. We're going to leave that in, producer Dave. Here's a little bit more information about Mark. Mark is the president of Athletes in Action. He joined the staff in 1982 and was placed in Cincinnati in a role that was split between campus field staff at the University of Cincinnati and office administration. Mark and his wife, Mary Ann, were married in 1985 and have 3 adult children: Lauren, Robbie, and Garrett. The householders have 4 grandchildren: Ezra, Wyatt, Avery, and Knox. Over the years, Mark has served in various roles within Athletes in Action, including leading campus and pro staff, the Ultimate Training Camp, and various international projects and assignments. He has served as AIA's 4th president since 2009. Were you born in 2009, Cecily?
I was 9 years old.
Oh my gosh. Okay, great. Mark loves to work in the mission, and a number of years ago, his wife exhorted him to develop some hobbies. That was great advice. He loves the outdoors, has recently played more golf, and loves to grill and smoke meat. He's currently on a quest to smoke the perfect brisket. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Hey, thank you so much. Great to be with you all. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Good. Thank you so much. And we are too. And the one thing I just got to tell you, get off my chest right away, is I feel really disrespectful referring to you by your first name. I always want to call you Mr. Householder. And I just have to tell you that you have this gravitas about you.
Well, I want to take that away. Let's make this a level playing field. Okay. So I'm Mark, and I feel very comfortable being Mark.
Okay. Good. That's good.
Or you can. Most people call me House. That's my nickname, okay. And I roll with that. So feel free to call me House.
Oh, love it. Okay, cool. Well, maybe Cecily, you'll call Mr. Householder or Mark House, but I'll refer to you as Mark from here on out. I'll do my best to do that. Okay, so a couple of quick things. I was thinking about, we usually start by asking folks to go through kind of their backstory and that sort of thing, and I think we want to still do that, but the focus of this episode is obviously you're at this point in your career, you've quote unquote made it to the top, reached a lot of your goals, whatever that looks like for every individual listening. So I thought we could quickly start there. And if we could just talk a little bit about your current role, what you do, and maybe tell us a little bit more about Athletes in Action.
Yeah. Athletes in Action started in 1966 to help meet a need. And that is to be a spiritual resource to athletes and coaches here in the U.S. and around the world. And so we have a very pronounced global footprint, serving athletes and coaches. And in many countries, that takes the role of chaplains or team character coaches in other contexts. But we're all about people, particularly in the athletic space. And we work with a lot of college athletes in the U.S., professional athletes, and Olympic athletes in almost 92 countries around the world. So it's a vast organization because the athletes of the world need support. They need encouragement because the pressures that they feel and the realities that they face are challenging and sometimes overwhelming. And so our staff come alongside and provide valuable resources for them.
For any type of sport, team sports, individual sports, do you limit yourself or your focus to any particular avenues there?
Not necessarily. Like at Ohio State University, we will work with I think last time I checked, 32, 34 individual sports teams, men and women's. And so our goal on campus at Ohio State would be to serve all of those different athletic teams and coaches. We just finished a big project last month at the Olympics in Paris. We had nearly 100 staff from about 25 countries in the Olympic Village, serving athletes, being a friend, bringing relational support, and some spiritual help too along the way.
Did you get to go to Paris?
I took a pass this year, but I've been to many Olympics starting in 1988. Which was the Summer Olympics hosted in Seoul, Korea.
Okay. Wow. Okay, great. I didn't know that you had that broad of a focus, and you're international as well, you said.
It is, and it's baked into our mission. So the U.S. is the largest expression of athletes in action in terms of staff and history, but we really do see ourselves as a globally minded mission organization.
So we've talked about the global reach and the focus of the organization, just to establish that this is not some small enterprise you're managing. How about the number of employees and those sorts of statistics, if you could share those as well? If broad strokes, of course.
Sure. Yeah. Our number of staff in the U.S. is about 700, and then another 400 to 500 staff distributed over the globe, and it's close to 90 countries. So it's and you deal with the complexities of staff from all around the world who they don't think necessarily like Americans think. They have a different mindset. They see the world differently, which when you think about diversity and bringing that into a common goal, direction, mission, alignment, when it's done well, it's a really, really beautiful tapestry of people coming together, accomplishing the same mission and the same goals.
So I feel overwhelmed with a team of 10 and can only imagine how you must feel on a daily basis. And that's no slight against the team at our company, obviously, but that's more of a slight against myself. So just in terms of magnitude, that's a big organization, whether you're talking nonprofit or for-profit or government agency or whatever, that's very, very large. So you've been in this role since 2009. If you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about what you do in your role on a daily basis. I'm sure it changes minute by minute, but if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about what you do, and if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about how your role has evolved over the years, that would be really helpful, I think, for us too.
Yeah, that's a great question. So let me summarize a couple things. In 2009, when I was hired to do this role, it was a pretty overwhelming moment for me. And that overwhelmed feeling did not go away after the first week or first month or first year of the job. I had some real growth opportunities and challenges to face, some giants that I had to stare down and figure out a way through them. And now, 15 years later, my role, my day-to-day, what I feel like the best value contribution I can give to the organization has definitely shifted. But I would say this, there's three primary things that I think are true of every president or every CEO, regardless of what they're leading. Number one, they have to give clear direction to the mission and the vision. That has to be crystal clear. Secondly, they have to build an organization of people that truly supports that vision and that direction. And then thirdly, they have to build a resource base of cash that sustains the ongoing lifeblood and direction of the vision and mission and the organization. And I would say direction, organization, cash, or resourcing basically is 85 to 90% of what a president and a CEO needs to be about.
Great. Podcast over. I think that was, you wrapped it up in a nice little bow right there. No, that's very helpful. And I think we'll come back to that, I think, later in the discussion. So thank you for that. If we could back it up just a little bit now, I think you've held a pretty long career at Athletes in Action. I know you've been in your current role since 2009. If you wouldn't mind if we could take a step back, you studied engineering in undergrad, right?
Right.
Okay, so I have to ask because, being the president of a recruiting agency, people's career paths fascinate me, and how they end up where they do is just so interesting, especially with a highly technical degree, which, I don't want to speak in too many generalities here, but that's a very technical minded kind of person who usually goes into those programs and may not be as people focused as someone such as yourself. So I'm just automatically confused when I read your bio. Confused is probably the wrong term. I'm really intrigued. I'm incredibly intrigued by how you've gotten to this point. And I think that would be very edifying for me and hopefully our listeners too. So if you wouldn't mind, I think you studied engineering. How'd you get here? I would love to hear a little bit about that too.
Well, you're good at your role, Clark, because you looked at my bio and you figured out there's something unusual going on with this guy. So you are right. So after 4 quarters of calculus and a quarter of differential equations at the University of Cincinnati, trying to get a civil engineering degree, I was wondering if I was over my head with the technical stuff. But I plowed through it, and I will say this: a couple things. I was wired. I am wired to solve problems, to make decisions, and that's fundamentally that's what engineers do. They build things, they design things, they take it to market, they prototype products, and they troubleshoot, and that's all the work of an engineer. Growing up, I had some deficits in the area of people skills, emotional quotient, just some different things like that. So I had some disabilities and some handicaps that I had to overcome working in a ministry or a mission that was very much about people, some problem solving, because any job has problems to solve and decisions to make. But I had to really work hard over the years to gain some consistency, some competencies in some of the people skills. And that's a whole pretty unique conversation that I'm glad to go into. But yeah, I'm a technically minded person. I love math. I love science. I love, making decisions, solving problems. But to be in my role with an organization like Athletes in Action for 42 years, I had to gain some other competencies.
So you were the engineering student we talked to who says, "Oh no, I'm in over my head. I've been here for 3 years. I can't back out now. I've got to get my degree. What am I going to do with my life?" Maybe that was you.
Yeah, I had a whole year called senior panic.
Okay.
And the panic of what am I going to do with my life? Because there was a number of things going on with me personally, and I love the engineering curriculum. I love the process. That was the right curriculum for me at the time, and the right degree program to pursue. But along the way, just to touch on this, I really had an awakening to my own personal faith. And that happened my freshman year in college through a series of circumstances. And as that piece began to really grow over the 5 years I was in college, that became the determination of kind of like, what am I going to do with my life? And so it eclipsed I got this degree. I love engineering. I love building things. I think I would have been a great engineer for a construction company. But that wasn't the path that I was supposed to be on.
Okay, so your faith journey comes into play very heavily here. You decide, or it almost sounds like you don't decide, it's decided for you that life is going to take you down a different path. Was that what caused this panic that you're describing your senior year? what was the dissonance or the cognitive dissonance or the so anxiety provoking for you? Was it going, oh my gosh, I've got to go pursue a career in ministry, but I don't want to do that, or I don't know what I can do, or what was the reason for the panic?
Yeah, that's a great question. Number one, what do you say to your parents who have invested in your college career and financially? And, are they going to understand kind of what's going on in my life? And you step into this unknown compared to an engineering career, which here's your salary, here's your job, here's your assignment. Compare that to what is this organization called Athletes in Action? Because at the time I got to know Athletes in Action, it was only 11 years old. And I really only knew the campus staff member that represented the organization. I didn't really know anything else about it. So there was a lot of unknowns compared to what I did know about an engineering career and what I had spent 5 years studying to become.
Okay. Did your parents share your faith, or was that kind of a shock to them as well?
They shared it to some degree, but maybe not as deeply as I was beginning to experience it.
Okay. So you're experiencing something that's probably bewildering and exciting and wonderful, but it's also causing some of this fear. So what do I tell mom and dad? You take it however you want from here, but it sounds like you went right into a ministry role right after college, though.
I did. Yeah. I considered my senior year doing some graduate work, graduate school, did a lot of different interviews with different large construction companies around the country. But in the end, I chose this path to pursue Athletes in Action. And my commitment, I guess, before God and the organization was, I'm going to do this for 2 years. I'm going to feel better trained and equipped to go into an engineering field and make a difference for my faith. And after that 2 years with Athletes in Action, I'll just go be an engineer and be a normal person, right? And so after 2 years, I don't think I ever truly reevaluated going back and trying to be an engineer. I just kept going.
Wait, I forgot to ask, were you an athlete in college? How'd you bump up against AIA then? If tell me about that.
Yeah, I played 4 years of football at University of Cincinnati. Played from 77 to 1980.
Oh, okay. Cool. What position?
I was a punter.
No kidding.
Yeah, that's another head scratcher, isn't it?
Oh, cool. Yeah. Oh my gosh. See, that's so interesting. We could talk about a lot of different things. I want to try to keep it on this narrative path though. So, okay. So 2 years in, doesn't even seem to end your career at Athletes in Action, doesn't even seem to cross your mind that you would go down a different path anymore. It sounds like you were pretty settled in at that point then.
Yeah. Yeah. And just people started coming into my life who, in the end, for whatever reason, really started believing in me. And they started giving me more responsibility, organizational responsibility. And over the years, the scope of what I ended up doing just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger because people believed in me and they challenged me and sometimes over challenged me. And I was in over my head. And I had to face giants. I had to figure out my own growth process, and I had to grow my character. I had to grow my competency. I needed to involve more people in my life to be better resourced. So a lot of those things contributed to my own growth journey that really came into play when I become the president of an organization, and I'm really over my head in that assignment for the first couple years.
Oh my gosh. So you had some folks who believed in you, you mentioned, when you started in your career. What did they see in you? And did you see that in yourself, or did you kind of disagree with them?
I think it was a combination of a number of things, Clark. I do think, looking back, there was a leadership gifting in my life. And through different people seeing it and speaking into it and giving me opportunities to lead and to grow, I began to believe that this was a gift. And I had a choice to develop it, to grow it, to steward it. And honestly, before God, he had given me this gift, and I had a responsibility to develop it. And that would be only the right thing to do for someone who gives you a gift. You honor it, and you take it seriously. And to develop something that's given to you is a way to say thank you to the person who's given you a gift. So for all those reasons, through a long journey, it was a people speaking into my life, giving me opportunities, letting me struggle, letting me figure things out by myself. And I think a combination of those things brought me to a realization that I had to keep going in this stewardship journey of managing this gifting that I had been given.
I want to just apologize to everyone because I feel like this is energizing me because I just have so many different thoughts and questions. And if this is not, taking a very neat and straightforward or linear path, I apologize. But I want to stop briefly. And Cecily, does any of this resonate with you about being earlier in your career, being pushed? Does any of that resonate with you at all?
Yeah. Well, when Mark was talking about people were putting things on and facing giants, I feel like that is something that's happened in my career very early on. I'm very grateful that Clark's kind of put stuff on me, but at times I'm like, I can't do that. And so it's very for someone just coming into their career and then that's not even what the path they set out on. Like that just has to be challenging because you already don't believe in yourself because you're not in the field that you thought you were going to go into. Feeling like you're not competent to do that.
And I wasn't fishing for a compliment.
No,
at all.
Yeah, it resonated with me a little bit.
Yeah. It felt to me like it would be the right time to kind of ask because what Mark's saying, I could see that in you quite a bit as well, which is super interesting.
Yeah. I mean, we've had the conversation before when I started interning here. I was like, well, I'm going to go to a marketing agency and then I'm just going to be there for 20 years and then I'm going to retire and then blah, 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 blah. And I mean, that plan went by the wayside and I work at a recruiting firm. So.
And you're essentially running the business, let's be honest. You run most of my life, which is for the better, I would say as well. So yeah, just that resonated with me too. And it's probably also because I, think probably earlier in my career, I was also looking for someone who would believe in me and help me, challenge me, help me build those skills. So I think it's super interesting to hear you talk about this. Kind of wanted to ask you too, you talked a little bit about facing some giants and being deficient in certain areas. And it's so interesting for me to hear you say that, Mark, because the last time I spent a significant amount of time with you, and I'm not trying to blow smoke, but your presence, it's just so, there's something to you that when you walk into a room, I notice it, and I don't know how else to say it, but, and I listen when you talk. And I always want to hear what you have to say. And I feel like if I can have some time with you, that fills me back up. And so to hear you say that this stuff didn't come naturally to you blows my mind because when I see you, when I visit with you, when I talk with you, I always feel leaving so fulfilled and, kind of like, I guess you'd say loved. I don't know how else to say it. So it just feels so effortless and natural. And again, I'm probably being too effusive in my praise, but the contrast to me is so interesting because I see who you are now. And looking back for you, you must have been a completely different guy, as a really young man.
Yeah, I was, that's a great segue. And thank you for those kind words, by the way. But it's a great segue to talk a little more about the process of acquiring some of the softer skills in leadership. So it's one thing to be able to solve problems and make decisions, build a strategic plan. Those are the harder skills that leaders need to have. But the softer skills really, I believe, set leaders apart. And it's the whole research around EQ, and I never heard of EQ growing up. Occasionally we take IQ tests, and you be curious about what your IQ was, and no one talks about IQ anymore.
Yeah.
You want people that are smart in a number of different ways, but I'll say this: one of the things that I got a lot of good things from my parents and my family of origin growing up in a small town in Eastern Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
But there were some things I didn't get, that I really needed to effectively lead a multinational organization as a president. And even before that, in different roles that I had, one of the things was the ability to step into and solve conflict and maintain the relationship with people. And the picture that I had growing up of how to handle conflict was primarily shaped by my dad.
Mm.
When my dad would get overwhelmed with his business and with life, and different things weren't going well for him, he would isolate. He would pull away relationally. And I started thinking that something was wrong with me because he would withdraw relationship, because he was overwhelmed and didn't know how to engage in conflict or tension and still be my dad and give me the love and assurance and the support that I needed. And so my model for conflict resolution was just that. I'd get into a tough situation, a conflict with somebody, and I was good, they were bad. And that good bad split did not help me with the skills I needed to be the leader that was required of me at that level in the organization. So I had to learn some really hard skills, some softer skills, as well as some harder skills on how to step into relationships where there's disagreement, where there's dissonance, where there's conflict, and maintain the relationship as best I could, but work toward a conflict resolution that really valued the other person and kept moving toward that person to show that I valued them.
Mm.
It's interesting hearing you say this, because I feel like a lot of time in the recruiting industry, but just in general, people say that you can't teach those skills. And you're saying you picked up on those skills and you were able to teach yourself those skills to be around people and interact with them. And that wasn't something that you were used to. So do you disagree with that statement then? And you feel like that's something you can come into in your life?
Yeah, Cecily, that's great. Absolutely. I believe that the softer skills can be learned, but it's hard work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's one thing to go to a seminar and learn from the gurus on how to build a strategic plan or how to develop a vision or mission statement. That's, in my opinion, humbly suggesting this, easier work than doing some of the harder emotional relational work, where you've really got to unpack some of the things that were just part of your family of origin. They were part of some hard experiences that you had growing up. I've got a metaphor that has helped me think through what some of this hard work looks like. And it comes from a Hebrew proverb. And if any listener is looking for a specific place, it's Proverbs chapter 20, verse 5. And this is what it says. The purposes of a person's heart are deep waters, but a man of understanding or a person of understanding draws them out. And so, the stuff that is represented in our deep waters are a lot of the hurts, a lot of the pains, a lot of the wounds from our past, and a lot of the joys and a lot of the dreams and a lot of the vision that we have for our life. But sometimes it's hard for that stuff to come out because we don't have access to it. And I had to dig into that deep water stuff particularly as it related to conflict and what happens to me in conflict, and what I saw modeled in my mom and dad's relationship. And I had to go into a hard, deep process that took several years to really work through and really get access to some of that, and bring people into that process to help me develop the softer skills of how to resolve conflict, how to move toward people when I don't feel like it and it's not comfortable, but it's the right thing to do.
It's one of my favorite verses. I actually have that in a Post-it note, on a Post-it note in my office. So it's so funny you say that. Who was the person or persons who drew those things out of you?
Well, you should be really interviewing my wife in this podcast, Mary Ann. She was the master at continuing to press into my life and giving me the grace that I needed. Grace essentially was the safety to be kind of messed up and screwed up in this area. But she also gave me some loving and clear feedback and reality that I didn't have to stay stuck as a person who lacked in some of those softer skills. So my wife, Mary Ann, was one. And then there was a professional that came into my life for a number of years. His name's Dr. John Townsend. And he was a professional person that provided some structure, some input. There was a group of 9 or 10 of us that were like-minded in terms of our professional, personal journeys and some of our desires. And we spent 3 years together in a context of some growth, some development, some process groups, where we really helped to unpack some of this stuff in each other's lives. And this was a big one that Dr. Townsend and others really helped me to uncover and find a pathway of growth and development so that I could gain some of these skills.
So from your family of origin, you learned some of these things. And I feel attacked, by the way, when you talk about that, because I withdraw too. And so I thought, oh my gosh, this is hitting home. So you learn some of these traits when you're stressed out, when you don't want to face something, when you're overwhelmed, or when you have conflict, you just kind of withdraw. You have some loving folks who are willing to kind of help you develop some of those skills. If you have to, and I wasn't anticipating this discussion going in this direction, but I think it's extremely healthy. Let's say now you have to have a difficult conversation or a confrontational discussion with a staff member or a friend or whatever. How is it that you approach those things now? Do you have a process? Being an engineer by training, I'm assuming you have a process.
Yeah. That's a great question. There is a process, but before I get into the process, I want to be clear that there was a lot of character work that had to be done in my life and continues to be done to this day.
Okay.
So my fundamental framework for leadership and philosophy is character and competency. And the competencies really flow out of and get life because of a character structure that is able to meet the demands of reality. And I picked that up from Dr. Townsend over the years because that's what he stood for. But then there are some hard skills when you go into a conflict situation, and you things like you do your best to put the person at ease. You give them a signal that there's some things that we need to have a conversation about, and you assure them that you're for them, that you want the best for them. You do your best to identify what the point of conflict is. You give them a chance to respond, to speak into that. And in the midst of that, you're continually leaning toward the person, which is a signal that you're for them and that you want the best for them and that you want to be on the same page with this. But this issue is something that needs to be resolved. And we're going to be hard on the issue, but soft on each other. And in a leadership role, you can model that. We're going to be soft on people, but hard on the issues. And maybe it's a a lack of follow through that an employee has that's hurting the business, and the consequence is challenging because it's impacting the bottom line, or it's hurting customers, or it's creating difficulty retaining customers. And so you're dealing with the follow through as an issue, not making it personal. And then you try to come to some agreement if you possibly can. And sometimes that's not possible. And then there's employment, other HR issues that you have to go into. And then I've always found it important that once the conversation is done, you try to write a written summary of the conversation to create a paper trail. And it's important that within 24 hours, you circle back and you just say, hey, I just want you to know I've been thinking about you. I know yesterday's conversation was hard. It was difficult, but I'm for you. Is there anything else we need to be talking about? So that's some of the harder skills, but to enter into those harder skills with a posture of I'm for you, I'm not perfect, I've probably made some mistakes in this process, and you're owning those things. Those are things that come out of a well-formed and developing character.
How do people generally react when you frame up those discussions that way?
Hey, it sounds good on paper, but was it Mike Tyson who says everybody has a good plan until they get punched in the face?
Yep.
So sometimes the best plans can go south and get derailed pretty quickly.
I've never talked with someone in the span of 5 minutes who quoted both Proverbs and Mike Tyson, but you've been able to do that.
Yeah, that might be a first. Might be a first for me.
You tie them all together so beautifully. But no, yeah, that is what Mike Tyson said, and I think it's very wise, a very wise statement. So it's a good practice and a good process. That's just one example of something that you've learned over the years, and I think we could probably talk about this more. But the broader statement I think you made a couple of minutes ago is character development, skill development. That never ends. It's a continuous sort of a process, no matter where you are in life.
Yeah. And honestly, when you kind of set this up in the introduction, you talked about me arriving, or I've made it, or whatever. And I thought there is so much more work that has to be done in my life because just even the other day, I was feeling like a failure. In just, there was a number of triggering moments that was happening professionally, and I'll just be transparent about how it really showed up. In the intro, I have this hobby of smoking meat, and I was smoking a number of pork shoulders, and for a staff gathering we're having a week from Friday, and I'm providing the smoked meat, and so I did it over the past weekend. I was going to vacuum seal all the pulled pork and freeze it, and I couldn't get the vacuum sealer to work well. And I've done this. It's not, you don't have to have an engineering degree to figure this out, right? But I was something going on that I couldn't get this to work, and it was frustrating me. And I just heard my internal self-talk saying things like, you can't get anything right. And that was a symptom of some other things going on, not just the vacuum seal machine not working well. But I don't know that I've arrived at anything, except I need to keep growing. And the minute I keep growing, I'm done.
Well, I was going to say we couldn't even get the audio to work today. So
that is true. Airing our dirty laundry as well. So you're telling me that those feelings of inadequacy may never go away. And it's funny when I hear you talk for two reasons. The first is I really do feel like you've quote unquote made it, and you've been such a good leader and steward of this organization for a long time. And your demeanor is generally so placid that it's hard to think of you as anything but composed on the inside as well. So that's just very interesting for me to hear you say that.
Well, I think we're all good at masking certain things, and so I have the skill of masking some things that are going on in my heart.
It's a good lesson, though, I think, for folks. I mean, if you've been a CEO or a president or whatever for however long it is, 15 years, you're still feeling that and battling those things. And it's a trivial matter ultimately, but you still have that negative self-talk. And that's good. I mean, as I'm sitting here reflecting on it, I'm going, okay, well, Mark feels that way sometimes. I guess I'm doing all right if I feel that way. I probably feel that way a lot more than Mark does, though, if I had to guess, but that's all right. It's a matter for another day. Okay, so if you wouldn't mind, we've talked a little bit about your management philosophy and those sorts of things, and some mentors and folks who've helped you along the way. Have there been any other external resources? You kind of talked about a group that you were part of, or but beyond that, any books or trainings or things like that that have helped you develop some of these leadership skills and competencies that we've kind of talked about?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've already noted Dr. John Townsend, who's been kind of the internal leader development person in terms of my own internal life. Another person, and actually, I just spent a half a day with him this week. Is a man who's now in his 80s, but I got connected with him when I was in my mid 20s. His name is Bob Beal.
Okay.
He built an organization called Master Planning Group International.
Okay.
And was able to host Bob and a friend of his for lunch on our campus, the Athletes in Action campus. And we just had an incredible conversation. And I was able to recount a number of things that over the years, Bob and his work, his consulting ministry, really of sort to me, has stuck with me. So many things that Bob has said, his framework for leadership and working with people. And so I'd put Bob Beal as one of those shapers and influencers of my life, and particularly leadership. And then I've had a rare but small number of leaders, directors in my life. In my whole time with Athletes in Action, over 42 years, I've had less than 5 directors. And I could go through each one of them and just say, this person built this quality into my life. This person modeled this skill or this ability. I'd learned this from this leader. So just really grateful to be the beneficiary of some really good directors and Athletes in Action and leaders and supervisors. And so, because they were all in their own growth and development process, and they were growing and developing, and they never stopped doing it. And that washed off on me, and I took that in from them. And that was a really cool thing that I can say a number of different specific things I can attribute to them, and I can pass that on to other people.
So despite the amount of wonderful people in your life, the growth that you've experienced over the years, you still confront feelings that we all do, which is strangely encouraging to me. But when you step into this role in 2009, you're the president of this wonderful, large global organization. So tell me about that. I mean, were there surprises in that role? Things where you thought, oh my gosh, I am not prepared for this. What maybe perhaps the way to ask that question would be, what was the biggest surprise for you when you stepped into that position?
Yeah, there's a couple things going on here. I had a confidence that I was supposed to be in this role. So I didn't doubt that at all. I knew that my Creator placed me in that role. At the same time, I had to face some of my own deficiencies, some of my own gaps, and some organizational gaps. And I'll give you one example. The president before me stepped out of his role 11 months prior to me taking the role.
Wow.
And there were some circumstances about what happened there. But the implication for me was that I did not have access to his previous 8 years of being a president in the role. He had relationships with influencers in sport. He had relationships with financial donors. He had relationships with partners. He had a unique history from his own experience of 8 years in the organization. And I really didn't have access to that. And so in some ways, I had to start almost from scratch to build a network of partners, get to know the organization from this position, build a financial donor base, build a board that would help support our mission. So there was a lot of things that created this. Wow, this is big stuff, and I've really got to show up every day to lead and give the organization what I think they deserve because of the unique platform and the high calling that we have to make a difference in the world.
Mark, how did you come into that position? Were you asked to come into it? Were you interviewed? What was the span of the 11 months before?
Yeah, well, I'd say in your world, an 11-month recruiting process is a very long process.
Yeah, too long, I would say.
Yeah, and it was too long for us, and it represented a real gap in the organization. We did not have a thought through succession plan. And that became a real issue that I currently am having to address and hopefully have addressed organizationally, because my days and months in this role are coming to an end. And we do have a succession plan and we are executing it. And it shouldn't take 11 months to find my successor. But it revealed a real gap in the organization, but an opportunity to fix something, because the next generation of leaders needed to be developed. They needed to be trained and equipped, and there needed to be a very strong bench for athletes in action and the future leadership.
Wow. Yeah, that's a long interview process for sure.
Yeah.
Has your role then, we talked about this briefly at the beginning of the discussion, but how has your role evolved then, now that you're on the back nine of your career, whatever you want to call it? But I'm assuming you've placed a pretty high emphasis on succession, people development, that sort of thing in the last couple of years, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. The last couple of years have been strongly invested in the succession planning. We call it building the bench that will lead to I hope a seamless succession process. And so that has really been job number one. And I'd go back to what I'd say job number two would be the direction, the organization, and the cash. And those are the three pieces that I think are 85 to 90% of my job right now. And I'd put the succession piece right at the top of the list of the organization, building the organization and making sure that the succession planning and processes are in place so that the next generation of leaders can be chosen out of that bench. And Athletes in Action has a gift of a seamless succession process.
Yeah, excellent. That makes total sense. Have you led that? Was that board mandated? Was that driven by your HR department, or was that something that you said, you know what, I remember back in 2008, 2009, when this all went down, I'm not letting this happen again? How did that come about?
Yeah, great question. So it has been a collaborative effort. It has been sponsored from my office versus HR. And certainly no disrespect to the gifted HR people that are in our organization and might be listening to the podcast. But the HR piece has been a complementary piece to this. It's been board mandated. And my boss, who lives in Orlando, has sponsored it very strongly. And I've been a very strong participant in it. So it's been a collaborative effort, but we've had a sharing of responsibilities and clarifying of what the roles are. And this process for us has involved about 20 different staff. who we think will form the nucleus of the next generation of leadership of athletes in action.
Amazing. So highly collaborative and matrixed. So interesting.
Yeah. And I think anytime you're building and developing people, it's a community engagement, a lot of collaboration. It takes a number of people to build the right leaders, from getting the right assessments, getting the right coaching, getting the right mentoring, helping people get the right next job so they can build out some new competencies. They can get to know different parts of the organization. They get the feedback that they need. And I saw this quote, and I know it. I think it's a book, and so if I knew the author, I would give the author the credit. But it goes like this: you watch them grow, or watch them go. So if an organization is not intentionally growing people, they have the opportunity to watch them go somewhere else where they will get the growth and the attention that they do need.
Watch them grow or watch them go.
Yeah.
Love it. It makes sense. You've talked a little bit about this notion of responsibility, of developing the gifts that God has given you. And I thought that was a very, I've just never heard it articulated in that manner. What are some of the other great responsibilities in your life, especially as a leader? And I hate to say at the tail end of your career, because I do agree that there's so much more for you to accomplish, whether it's, at Athletes in Action or somewhere else. But what are those great responsibilities that that you believe you have at this point?
Yeah. Well, let me shape the answer to that with your company in mind. You have an incredible opportunity to intersect people's lives at a pretty critical moment in their journey, their life journey, their career journey, whatever that journey, however they think about it, and it plays out. But you have an opportunity to help them take a step toward something that might be described as you can flourish in this next thing. And we have an opportunity to come alongside of you and help you find what that is so that you can better be the person that you're created to be. So I was sharing this with some college football coaches recently who invited me in to do some mentoring and reflecting and just leadership discussion. And I said there's three things that you want to do with people who, and everybody's got unique gifts and abilities, but the three things that you want for that person are this. You want them, number one, to discover their spiritual gifting, their natural talents, their abilities, their skills. So discover. Secondly, is you want to help them develop those, grow them, build the capacity. And thirdly, you want to help them deploy those so that whether it's in a company, whether it's in a community of people, the best of them is coming out and the people around them feel the best of them. So discover, develop, and deploy are three things that you as a company can help people do with their gifts, talents, and abilities.
So sometimes when I, can't sleep at night, had a rough day, I come home, my wife says, "How was work?" And I say, "You know what? I don't even know. I honestly don't even know what happened, what I did. I need some time." And in those moments, in many moments, I think, what am I doing? Like, what is it all about? I sometimes feel like I have this compulsion that drives me to build things, create things, lead teams, whatever. And I'm making this about me, but I'll make it more universal here in a moment. But that's a struggle that I often, face. And then sometimes I just think, like, what the heck is this all about? What are we here for? And maybe that answer you just gave is, I don't know, maybe that's the answer. Maybe that's what it's all about. Is that what it's all about for you? I mean, ultimately, Mark, why are you here? on earth?
Yeah, that's a fundamental question that I think everybody has to wrestle with, and probably too few of us really wrestle with why did my creator put me on the planet? Am I
Right.
just here to consume things and take up space and just enjoy whatever I can enjoy? And or is there there's something bigger going on? So let me share this. We just built and opened an indoor facility on our campus, on our sports complex in Southwest Ohio. And our value proposition, our brand promise is to build total athletes. And what we're saying to athletes is this: you think, and you're right, you were made for sport. You're made to compete. You've got physical abilities, skills, strength, quickness, speed. You've got a mind that can figure out game plans and schemes and different things like that. You've got a heart and a spirit that drives you to compel or to compete. While you think you were made for sport, in reality, you were made for more than sport. And every athlete has to think through their identity and their ultimate purpose, because at some point, sport ends.
Right.
It's over. And that could be their decision. It could be their coach's decision. It could be a decision that's precipitated by an injury. They get cut, whatever. I think people are the same way. At some point, they think there's something bigger going on in life. I'm part of something bigger. There's a bigger purpose for me and my life, and getting involved in a journey to discern what is that is life-giving. Maybe not necessarily easy, but people can discern and lock into a purpose beyond their professional life if they invest the time and the resources to do it.
Yeah, it's a fundamental question. And I thought of anybody, you would probably have some pretty keen insights into that. But there's a fine line, I think, as well, between thinking through these things very intentionally, but also kind of gazing at your navel. But maybe you disagree with that notion.
No, I think it has to start with a framework. What is the framework in which you're in which you're thinking about purpose in life, and what are the inputs that you're open to consider? Certainly, I think one of the inputs is feedback from other people, because people experience us. And when you engage a person and you say, I'd like a candid, honest answer. Give me the good, bad, and everything in between. What is it like to be on the other end of me? Tell me what that experience is like. And you get this picture, but that's an input from a frame of reference from a friend, or maybe it's a spouse or a colleague or a boss. By the way, that's good HR practice, as you know, to get a lot of good feedback. But honestly, a lot of my framework for how I think about purpose comes from the Bible. I'm a spiritually minded person. I believe that God is eternal. I believe that God has given me life, and there's personal physical life that I can enjoy, and God's given me a life that I can enjoy. But there's also something bigger, and there's an eternal life that the Bible has a lot to say about that. And so I've drawn a lot of my understanding of purpose in life from that framework and from that input. So the Bible is a big point of my input about who I am, what my identity is. And your podcast is called Who Are You? And fundamentally, I'm a person who gains my identity from my relationship with God.
That's where it all starts for you.
Yeah, that's where it starts for me.
I love that. That's great and very healthy, and probably grounds you in times of stress and it's something that you can always harken back to as well.
Yeah.
That's great. Go ahead. Did you have something else to say? If I cut you
No,
off.
I think just, we could talk a lot about that, but you're right. And my frame of reference and the primary input for how I think about purpose and identity doesn't make life necessarily easier for me. It doesn't necessarily mean that I live a stress-free, worry-free life. It doesn't necessarily mean that my self-talk is all positive, affirming, warm, accurate. My internal self-talk can be very condescending and very judgmental toward me. So I'm not immune from the everyday challenges and headwinds and difficulties in life, but I do believe I have a unique spiritual resource to bring to the battle and take out those giants that continually call me out and try to take me out.
I have just a couple more questions if you're okay on time, Mark.
Sure. Yep.
Okay. We talked with another person about vulnerability, and I thought it was very interesting when he stepped into a senior leadership role for one of the first times. He said one of my things was I was just very vulnerable with people. And in my direct reports coming into this and said, hey, look, here's where I'm deficient. Here's where I need to grow. Here's how you can help me. And it seemed to be that was effective for him. I'm wondering how I think of this myself, even in the context of my family or the organization I lead. I think there's a balance, though, between vulnerability, expressing that, and also just showing that you're a pillar of strength for them at the same time. So, I didn't really formulate a question for you there, but what would your take be on that kind of a concept between the balance of vulnerability and sharing your strength with folks and being that pillar or rock for them to kind of lean on when they need that in a leader?
That's a really good question. And I don't know that I've got all of that figured out and fine tuned.
Yeah.
But I do know this. People that, whether you're speaking to them in an audience or you're interacting with them in a small group setting, or you're just having a one-on-one conversation, people appreciate vulnerability and transparency. I know that for a fact. I know that by experience. I also know that there's different ways that has to be communicated depending on the audience.
Okay.
And in my case, my own comfortability based on the audience. So I've tried to develop a professional vulnerability that gives people the signal that I truly am human.
Yeah.
I freely talk about my family of origin story without diminishing the impact that my mom and dad had on my life. But no mom and dad gives every son or daughter everything they need to thrive in life and be successful. And so I share that in a way that puts more on me than my dad or my mom. But when I start talking about deficiencies of, in this case, how to handle conflict and some of the behaviors that I learned from my family of origin, people relate to that. And so they find me human, and that, I can connect with that. I have a story that's kind of like that. And so there's a professional vulnerability. It's also important for people to hear that you're not stuck in that reality. There is a pathway of growth. And when, like we did on this podcast, when I start to reference my own growth process of how I can gain skills and competencies in that area to be a more efficient and effective leader, that gives them the hope that can be part of their journey too. So, but there's also times, and there's certain relationships where I can just be flat out raw. I can be completely undone. And these are a handful of relationships that I can say truly and honestly whatever's going on with my life, and I'm not judged. but I'm accepted by them, and they can step into that messy, dark, cold, lonely space, and they can start to give me some of the relational nutrients that I need.
Mm. Being a leader, though, can be very lonely, and you have to have those relationships a lot of times outside of your organization to sustain you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yet, I think one of the questions that you posed there that I got through email was, so what is it like when you get to the top? It's metaphor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Being at the top. But one of the things it's not, it doesn't have to be lonely.
Mm.
It doesn't have to be lonely. If it is lonely, that's a choice that a leader has made. You've chosen an isolated path. If you're at the top and you're lonely, you've chosen that, and you don't have to choose that.
Mm. I'm just thinking about that then. So what is that? So you mentioned some of the relationships you have. Any other ways? I joined a local entrepreneurs group. We meet monthly. That's been helpful for me to relate to other folks, and them to relate to me and the struggles I have. And I go, oh my gosh, I'm not that unique. That helps me too.
Yeah. Yeah. David Brooks is a New York Times bestselling author. And in one of his writings, he talks about the difference between eulogy virtues and resume virtues.
Hmm.
So in your company, you look at a lot of virtues, or you look at a lot of resumes, and
Sure.
and they're the resume virtues, the polished up. This is who I am. This is what I can do. This is what I've done. But I think it's more important to work on the eulogy virtues, that resume that's going to be spoken about at your funeral. And so, who's going to speak about those virtues? Who's going to speak about those character qualities? Who's going to speak about the messy Mark householder that needed grace and truth and relationship because he couldn't do it alone? I want my friends who I've done the harder journey of life with, that are not necessarily my direct reports at Athletes in Action. Those are the people that I want to be able to stand at my funeral and say, Mark was kind of a messy person. He didn't have it all figured out. He really fumbled around in life in a couple of these different areas, but he was open to relationship and outside input. And he, at the end of the day, he wanted to be faithful to grow as a person, because that's what honors and pleases God.
You answered my next question, which was, what do you want your legacy to be? And I think you answered that quite beautifully, unless you have anything you want to add to that.
Now, I honestly wrestle with the whole legacy, the legacy statement, the word, the definition. I wrestle with it because I think it can be, but it doesn't have to be, building a monument to yourself. And people can become obsessed with it. What is my legacy? And so I'd rather think about it this way. My job, my ultimate job description, is to be faithful, to be true to myself, to be faithful to God, true to Him, and true to those that I'm in relationship with, and faithful to them. And out of that faithfulness, there's a wake. I've never been a water skier. I tried it once and I failed, and I never got behind a boat again.
Yeah,
but
me
I do
too.
know what's true about a power boat that's gliding down a lake is it creates a wake, and that wake is an impact. It's what the motor boat and the engine leaves behind. And so I'd rather be that faithful, true person that leaves something behind, and it's faithfulness and honesty and truth with people. And it's not a building, it's not an organization, it's not a set of accomplishments, because those are the resume virtues. And I'd rather be more about the eulogy virtues, because I think that's that's the impact you leave in people's lives, the impact on their character.
Yeah. Is there anything you'd like to plug before we let you go for the afternoon?
I thought of one thing.
Yeah.
We have in Southwest Ohio an incredible sports complex and retreat center that is 175 acres. It's made for athletes. It's made for coaches. It's made for a developmental experience for people that want to journey and become a total athlete. And so people can go on our website at athletesinaction.org, and they can be curious as to whether there might be an opportunity or a program there that would fit for them in this season of life. So, yeah,
Excellent.
that's what I'd want to plug.
Well, you've told me about it. It looks fantastic. It's on our company's short list of venues to potentially visit for a retreat, if you'd have us, obviously. But it does look like a fantastic venue and opportunity to visit there. This was everything I thought it would be and then some. And I mean that in the best way possible. So I am really, really grateful for your time. Cecily, anything you'd like to add?
Well, I've been thinking of this question since we started, and this is not going to help anyone with their lives or change their lives. But Mark, what's your favorite sport?
Oh, my favorite sport. That could be the toughest question you've thrown out. I love to golf. I've had a resurgence in my golf in the last couple of years. I love to watch football. I stayed up way too late last night watching my favorite team, the Baltimore Ravens, lose by a half an inch. But I really enjoy all sports because sport is a place that people can flourish, they can compete, and I believe we were made to compete. And I love watching people compete, watching some of the Olympics. Some of the gymnastics, some of those sports are like, wow, that is serious athletic ability at the highest level. And it's just all fun to watch. So that's a long answer for a very good question.
It's a great way to wrap it up. Well, thank you so much for your time, Mark. This really meant a lot to us to get you here. And I think I've learned a lot in the process too. So thank you.
Thanks, Clark. Thanks, Cecily. You guys have been great hosts and hostess.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Take care.